Welcome back to another episode of Trading Secrets. Today, I am joined by Rachel Cruze, a two-time #1 national best-selling author, financial expert, and host of The Rachel Cruze Show, which I had the pleasure of being on. Since 2010, Rachel has worked for her father's personal finance legendary empire. You may have heard of him, Dave Ramsey. It's called Ramsey Solutions, where he and her and their massive team teaches people to avoid debt, save money, budget, and how to win with money at any stage in life. She's also authored 3 best-selling books, including Smart Money, Smart Kids, which she co-wrote with her father. And today we're going to discuss all things money with Rachel, including what her opinions are on today's stock market, the housing market, and what she thinks are the key factors that shape people and how they manage their money in a time like today, which is just mayhem. So Rachel, it is so timely that you're on, and thank you so much for being on this episode of Trading Secrets.
Yeah, Jason, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So for anybody that doesn't know, Ramsey Solutions, I mean, I gotta just pump the tires. I walk up there, didn't know what to expect. I'm doing Rachel's show. It is an empire. I mean, what they have built and the impact they have made in Nashville, Tennessee, and well beyond is incredible. And I saw that your dad started this empire and built it in 1992. So that's when you were just a kid. I'm curious, what was it like seeing your dad kind of build this from nothing? And additionally, what was it like living in the household of a pretty strict financial father with a lot of guidance and principles?
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like people are like, "Oh, you're Dave Ramsey's daughter," and they have this idea in their head that we had like mutual fund birthday parties and like we're in budget camps every summer, all this stuff. And honestly, thankfully, that it just wasn't the case. Mom and Dad did a really great job, obviously, of teaching us how money works, but they did it in the ebb and flow of life. It was not this legalistic, unauthentic way of presenting money. It was like, hey, this is everyday life, and here's what it looks like. Here are good decisions, here are bad decisions, here's why. And then even as kids, when I was younger, like people were given an allowance, and I was like, we were never given an allowance. We were on commission from as early as five years old. And it was like, if you work, you get paid. If you don't work, you don't get paid. And so that concept in my mind was so normal. So I feel like I kind of grew up in a world, Jason, where what I was taught, I realized when I left home, I was like, oh, this isn't normal. Like all the things that everything from investing from a young age to avoiding debt to working hard, all of that, it was kind of this, oh, wait, people are just kind of catching up to these ideas where I feel like I just lived with them my whole life. So that part I think was unique in a sense, but I was obviously grateful for that. And yeah, as far as Dad's job, his career, I mean, we were there from the beginning. Like we were the kids were the first shipping department. I always say, like with his books, like we had to put them in envelopes and have labels. We shipped everything out of the living room. There was a poker table that was basically his office table growing up. And then slowly but surely, it's a true entrepreneur. I grew up in an entrepreneur's home is what it was. So as kids, you were drug along to anything and everything going on that the family was doing business wise. And that was just life. And so I really don't think I realized the impact until I started traveling and speaking with him when I was 15, because they started doing these massive events around the country. And at 15, I remember going into an arena and there was like 10,000 people. And I was like, wow, this is a lot of faces and a lot, So it was moments like that you realize, okay, there's an impact. Something he's saying is touching a nerve. Something he's saying is giving guidance that people are listening and grabbing onto. So that's kind of when I realized, okay, the truth about money and what does that mean? What does that look like? And then as for myself as an adult, deciding my own career path of, okay, what do I want my life to look like? Because it was not this idea that it was just a shoe-in that you're going to work at Ramsey because you're a Ramsey kid.
Right.
But I really did kind of grow this passion for the money message and talking about money and understanding money in college and even earlier than that. So I kind of just transitioned to this job and I've been doing it for 12 years. And yeah, it's great. It's so fun. I love my job just like you love yours. You get to talk about a subject that you're like, it's fun. I enjoy it.
The growth's incredible, and I think what he's done from an impact perspective and what you've done in such a quick time frame is something I want to touch on. Before I do, though, I love the budgeting boot camp. That's amazing. It's hilarious that people always have that in their mind. I don't know that I necessarily think about like, oh, you're in budgeting boot camp. One thing I do probably think about, though, is from my understanding and listening to some of his guidance and principles, and even like some like I think of the arguments I've seen that he's gotten in with staff, he's pretty critical with overspending on material things, right? So was that ever like a struggle for you? Like, in maybe, you earned a couple bucks and you wanted to get the nice car or the nice watch or the Louis Vuitton? Because I do think that's something that people struggle with today, quite often. And what is kind of like the
Yeah.
culture, even in the office space? And for you with buying those things, like, were you hiding them from dad? Did you just not have that philosophy? What's your take on that?
Okay, so it's a little bit of a misconception. So here's
Okay.
this is what was said to me growing up, and what I even say to people because I think it's a great picture that it's okay to have nice stuff. Don't let your nice stuff have you.
Mm.
So it can have you really in two ways. Where the controversy comes in our world is it can have you in debt. So when you owe something, you're not owning it; it owns you in a very
Right.
real sense, and so that your stuff has you. So we are critical of overspending and living beyond your means if you're not living within your means. So if you're taking on debt to go and get the Louis Vuitton purse, or you're going into debt to drive the BMW, whatever it is, that stuff owns you at that point. So that's a red flag to say, hey,
Right.
how can you get out of that? And then your stuff can own you in more of, I think, more of an emotional way, where your identity, you think your happiness, your joy comes from stuff. And if that's your life, you really kind of end up living this rat in a wheel type of mentality, because we all know, we all fall for it. I still do, that you think, if I could just have this thing. I've been wanting a Tesla, Jason, for like 3 years, and I just got one. I
Let's
ordered it like in
go.
the fall, and I just got it. And even in that, I'm like, when I just get my Tesla, everything's going to be okay. Once I get, like, we can still fall for that idea. But the truth is, like, your life doesn't change really. You are still you in all the good and the bad and the ugly. And your stuff doesn't define that. It doesn't change who you are. So again, it's okay to have nice stuff.
Yeah.
Just don't let your nice stuff have you. So
It's
I got a Louis
such
Vuitton sitting right here, Jason, if you want to know. Driving
I
Tesla,
love it.
all the things. But again, it's an idea of saving up and paying for it,
Yep.
and just knowing emotionally, like, that bag is great, but take it away. I'm still Rachel.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I love the concept you talked about, like, just the idea of what is like the psychology behind why you're spending that. Is there a deeper rooted issue that you're trying to maybe fulfill an insecurity or a lack of confidence in something else? And you're actually using your money to make up for that, and just analyzing that is huge. A question I have for you though, because I remember when Caitlin was on Dancing with the Stars, I'll just never forget this. They put us up in an apartment building. Okay. So we're in an apartment building. So no one has ownership. No one has ownership. They're renting.
Yeah.
And they had a valet service. And the cars coming up. I mean, the
Oh,
Lamborghinis, the Maseratis, the Bentleys. I'm like, why you have a $300,000 car when you're renting? My question to you is, when you get to that step that you're like, I'm at the Tesla perspective. I got the Louis Vuitton because I can afford it. I'm not using debt to take it. Do you have a golden rule about when you can afford something like a Tesla? Is it a certain amount of cash? Is it a certain amount of earnings? What's your rule for yourself? And what's the advice you have for someone else if they're thinking like, I think I do deserve the Louis Vuitton and I don't have to, go into debt to get it?
yeah. For me, it's not specifically a number, but I think it's this idea that it's still a very small percentage of your world. And I think that's the big thing. It's all about percentages, right? I mean, if you're worth $2 billion, we are talking about different things in life versus if you're making $40,000 a year. So, like, for a guy, that has a $200 or a $200 million net worth, yeah, him buying a Bentley, he could buy 5 of them and he doesn't even notice.
Mhm.
It's like, him buying a biscuit compared to someone that's making $50,000 a year. So it's all about percentages. So for me and my husband, we look at everything like, hey, what's a small percentage of our world? And I even go through a little bit of the emotional process if I can, that I'm like, okay, if I just throw this money on the interstate and let it burn, and I still look at our account, does it freak me out? And if it freaks me out, I'm like, okay, let's just wait a little bit. Let's wait a little bit. But if you get to the point that you're like, okay, that amount, it just doesn't change my life, big or small, really, at this point. Like, sure, maybe it's a big thing that you're like, ooh, the dollar amount feels big, but a percentage of your world, as long as it's small and it doesn't really affect you majorly one way or the other, I think you have freedom to go and do it.
It's a great piece of advice, and it reminds me immediately of what we had the world's best poker player, Daniel Negreanu, on. He's won over 50 million bucks playing poker, and he talks a lot about bankroll management and making sure that what you're playing with at the table is such a small percentage of what you have allocated towards your budget with poker. Because to exactly your point, Rachel, when it's that small of a percentage, you're not playing on emotion if you win or lose. You're playing on logic, strategy, and numbers. And it's
Yes.
funny how there are parallels there. Tons of lessons from your father and tons of lessons that you've instilled on so many people. What would you say, either growing up or today, is one lesson or maybe strategy that your dad implemented to you growing up that maybe you don't agree with or take a different approach with?
Oh, good. Well, he hates Teslas, so we can start there.
So that's a good
Like,
starter.
why would you buy a computer on wheels? I'm like, well, I don't know.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd say from a values perspective, I very much agree with him. I think more of our difference is our approach. And so if you've
Okay.
listened to Dave at all, he's wonderful. I don't know if do you do the Enneagram, Jason? Have
Oh
you ever
yeah,
done
of
the
course.
Enneagram?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's an 8, like through and through. So
Yep.
it's just like, and again, it makes great radio. It may, I think partly of what's kind of made him successful is this cut and dry personality, and he's going to tell you like it is. And I feel like I'm more of a friend where I'm like, I'm going to walk
Mhm.
beside you, and I'm in the trenches. He's 65, right? I think he's 65, 63, 62. Oh gosh, I don't know how old my dad is. 62, something like that. And I'm like, he's been, sort of out of the game of just like being in the trenches in life. Like, I have 3 little kids. We're doing back to school shopping this month. You're at the grocery, like I'm in it like day in and day out. And so
Mhm.
there's a level for me where I'm like, when I hear a caller's question or something comes up on social, I'm like, I'm her. Like, I feel like when I see that question or that issue or that problem, I'm like, I get it in real time, where he gets it because he filed bankruptcy when I was young. So like, he has pain points from his money journey that he can go back to in a instant. But I think over years, he's like, just do it. Just do it. And I'm like, it's hard just to do it. Like, because you want stuff, and to say no to yourself is not fun. So I think his approach and my approach is different.
Yeah, the differences in approach for real. I almost look at, like, when I listen to some of his shows, I'm like, it's almost like he's like a father figure to people that like didn't have that guidance. Like he'll
For
he'll
sure.
call people out, he'll yell at them, and obviously different stages, different ages, you guys bring different things. One
Yeah.
thing I'm curious about, especially in a time like today where there's so much social media, there's a lot of entrepreneurial work, there's a lot of side hustle, and there's a lot of individuals just within their current companies that want to make a bigger splash. What do you attribute to his success and your success with the impact you're making in small periods of time? Like when you had mentioned that just shortly after he had launched, he's filling up 10,000 people events, like 10,000 people going to a live event, for anyone listening, is almost impossible to fill unless you are like a massive, massive artist selling out stadiums. So if you have to like dissect it a little bit, what are things that he's done and you've done to create that type of splash that quickly?
It's a good question. A couple of things. I think one, for his sake, more so than mine, he's just never stopped. And so, like, if there's competition, even in the space, he's like, they're going to be gone in 5 years. Like, I've seen these people come and go constantly. And he's
Mhm.
like, it's the tortoise and the hare, a little bit of that thing. Like, you're just going to keep going and going and going and going and going and going and going. And so I think that perseverance, the longevity of just simply staying with it,
Mhm.
honestly, I give him a lot of kudos, because whether it was the radio industry 15 years ago, because all your big talk shows, were owned by these massive media companies, and we are the only self-syndicated radio show. It's like, I think it's number 2 talk radio show in America right now, and everything really in the top 8 is owned by a company. And so from early on, him just kind of calling his own shots and figuring out, okay, what's best for this. So I think the longevity, the perseverance is big. And then also, Jason, the way I think Ramsey, we do a good job connecting money in all aspects of your life, because some people think of money of just a number sitting in your checking account or your investments. It's more than that. Like, your money affects your relationships, it affects your mental health, it affects everyone and everything around you. And so touching those points of money is really important. And so there's this level of inspiration with our plan,
Mhm.
but also instruction. And so having 7 steps, the 7 baby steps,
Yep.
I think it's huge for people. I mean, if you read any good book about whether it's habits or change, having a guided plan helps people because you're not thinking like, what do I do next? And it's like, here are the 7 things you do in good times and bad times. It's these 7 things. So it gives a level of instruction that I think really does help people. But also that inspiration to the idea that attaching money to other parts of your life and understanding what it does to you spiritually, emotionally, not just financially.
I love that inspiration, instruction, consistency, and then finding pain points of the masses. Those are things that you guys have done, but those are things that are applicable to anyone that's creating any business that you can lay out a plan and do it effectively. And you guys have done that. I mean, some of the numbers that I had saw 23 million plus people tune in to the radio shows, the podcasts, weekly videos, 6 million plus families changed their lives with your guided money plan. You guys have 5,000 trusted pros helping your fans with taxes, real estate, insurance. I mean, 19 national best-selling books. It's wild, the numbers when you look at the business. We're going to get into some money tips that anyone here listening can utilize immediately today. Before we do, while we're on the topic of Ramsey Solutions in the business, when you look at all the success you've had and some of the numbers that I outlined of all the lines of business that you guys have, which is a multitude and a material amount, which would you say from a business perspective generates the greatest revenue for Ramsey Solutions, and which are more loss leaders?
Well, it's funny now because the live event aspect has
Yeah,
changed
that's got it.
completely, right? And even before COVID, like just what people used to, how people would take in content and what they would give up their Saturdays for back in 2004 is a whole lot different than 2022. And so honestly, our live event model, generated revenue for years. And then it kind of started getting to this point that it didn't. And so, so today we still do live events. Like we're going, I think, to 5 cities in the fall.
Cool.
Phoenix, actually, our Phoenix one just sold out, but it's around 2,500 people, not 10,000 anymore, because those arena things are just not, people don't do it.
Yeah.
And so now we look at those events less on a profit standpoint and more just being able to go out and be with people, because there's a human connection that I think we're missing in culture and in anything, because the social media, it's wonderful, it's great, but you just miss the human connection.
Totally.
And so much of our content is so relational that like when we can go out and do book signings and sit with people and be live with an audience, like we love that. I mean, it's good marketing. It's definitely fuels excitement around the brand. I mean, I think there's a business aspect for sure, but overarching live events for us now, it does not generate revenue. But we still do it because of some good business practices, but also just to be with people.
Yeah.
That's so huge. Yeah. Yeah. And then I would say our biggest revenue drivers definitely are probably the business to business aspects. Our business to consumer does well, but it's funny, the things that are out front, like publishing, live events, these things, those aren't the biggest revenue generators. It's usually kind of the back end. And we have, subscription models with classes and budgeting tools and all of that. So that definitely, it's kind of those behind the scene things that are working, that are still helping people that generate more of the revenue, so that I feel like we can go and do the outward facing things that people see all the time.
Amazing. Well, stay tuned for the recap. We'll talk a little bit about some of their business to business products and models aligned with their business and consumer. So we'll cover that. Now we got to get into the topic that everyone is tuning in for, just your take on what's going on. I mean, it's mayhem out there, right? We just got the inflation report, 9.1%. S&P's down 21% year to date. You see the gas prices up and down, and oil per barrel, that price is fluctuating in a wild world. But then you start to get some of these, these statistics that show that there is some hope, like unemployment being 3.6%. And what I'm hearing from a lot of the people that follow and listen to Trading Secrets and participate in Restart Consulting is it's like this damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you sit in cash, you're losing money. If you put in the market, it's losing. If you buy real estate now, it's at all-time highs. So people are confused. And what I would love to do with Rachel is just go through like a couple quick topics and just get like your go-to strategy for someone listening on these topics, if you're good with that.
Yes, I love it.
Let's do it. So the first one, I know it's your favorite one, credit card debt. What is your take given the current economic
Jason, we got to talk about this. I know. Yeah, so my advice would be all debt, any debt, credit cards, anything, get out as quickly as possible. There is something about your largest wealth building tool is your income. And when your income comes in and you actually get a say over where your money is going, that's when you're able to build wealth the fastest. But when it's coming in and it's going out to 3 different credit card payments, student loans, 2 car loans, I mean, and it's just going out, what you don't have as much left to not just spend on yourself and to give, but also to save and invest. And so when you look at your income as your largest wealth building tool, it changes your mindset. So for credit card debts, yes, I would get out, pay off your smallest debt first. I teach that versus the highest interest rate because, again, I think personal finance, it's 80% behavior, it's 20% head knowledge. We all know, we can do the math, we can figure it out. But getting those quick wins, it does something to the human spirit where you're like, okay, when people feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck, they're drowning in debt, when you can pay off even a $500 credit card bill that's been going month to month to month with you, when you focus all of your time and energy, you pay it off and it's done, there's this sense of hope of like, oh wow, that really happened. I really just paid off debt. Oh my gosh, okay, I go to the next one. And so that method I think is very helpful, not necessarily mathematically, but again, more the behavior change side. So credit card debt, yeah.
Got it. And so that's called the snowballs, which you guys have.
Yes, versus the avalanche. So the avalanche is highest interest rates. Yep.
Got it. Snowball versus avalanche. While we're here for 1 second. So then in general, you would agree that paying off the highest interest rate debt is numerically, it probably is the most beneficial. But what you're saying is based on the psychology and behaviors, you guys in the research you've done have seen a lot more success with really just focusing on small wins and the psychology behind the momentum and behavior with snowball.
100%, yeah. Because if we were doing math, we wouldn't be in credit card debt in the first place. So
literally, that's a very good point. Okay, snowball versus avalanche. We'll talk a little bit more in the recap. Of course, Ramsey Solutions is snowball, and they've had a ton of people get out of debt. Okay, student loans. People are questioning, should I take a student loan out? They have these student loans. Should I invest or should I pay them off? What's your take on student loans and what advice do you have?
Yes, obviously pay them off. With all the COVID, everything that's gone through with the COVID bills and relief and all of that, there's been some time. So get on it now, like start working on it now. And I feel like Sally Mae, she just like moves in and is part of the family for decades for people. So get her out as fast as possible. So that's, my first piece of advice. And then if you are thinking about taking out student loan debt, again, I'm just not a huge fan. I think that it's a really predatory industry. And I think it's done way more harm than good. And as they're talking about forgiveness, that's been said in DC for years now.
Forever.
And I don't wait on DC to change my life. So like go after it. But that I'm like, okay, if you're going to forgive something, then what you're saying is it's not good. You're trying to get people out of it. So then why are you still implementing these loans? And so it's so difficult because I think that some states, they have free community college. There's in-state universities. And now, and Jason, I don't know, we kind of live in different worlds a little bit. But in my head, for majority of Americans that are out getting jobs, the CEO really doesn't care that much about where your degree is from. It's certain industries they do, but overall, it's like you have a degree, you show work ethic, you show humility, and that you're going to work hard and help them do the job that they're wanting you to do. That's what people want to see. And so we've fallen for this trap that our pedigree is suddenly going to, and I think millennials were the first big generation that we've experienced this, that if I have this sheet of paper, I'm going to become successful. Like that was said to us in high school, you got to go to college, And I'm all for education. I love higher ed. I am all for it. But we just have to be smart about what we're doing. And these students that are coming out with a $90,000 in student loan debt to get an undergrad degree in English, it makes no sense. There's no marketplace value for the investment you just put in. And now you're graduating underwater financially. You're stressed out. You're trying to find a job. And it's a disaster.
We are the most educated generation and we have half the wealth of the previous generation. Like that's very eye-opening. Yes. I completely agree with you too. I went to a private school my first year, my freshman year, and then I transferred to a state school. And that private school was in 1 year more than the sum of 3 years
Oh my
at the
gosh. Yeah.
public school. And I completely agree with you. Yes, there are certain very specific niche industries where going to like an Ivy League school is massive within those spaces, but you're talking about like 3 to 5% of all colleges. And then
Yep.
also, like you talk about price elasticity, right? Well, we see it right now. If this coffee becomes $10 a cup, less people buy it. College is not that way. When the
Yes.
price goes up because of the supply that the government has offered individuals that are going to school, the price goes up and the demand goes up. So it's creating these issues. Yeah, totally on the same page. And I think hoping for someone to pay it off is definitely not the right strategy with anything or any debt you take out.
Right.
Okay, let's go to investing. This is, I think, the trickiest one of them all, right? Because
Yeah.
you sit on cash, you're losing 10% right now. You utilize the cash, everything's getting crushed. What type of advice would you give to someone that has their debt in order, that feels like they're in a good place to start investing? What suggestions or strategies in a time like this would you give them?
Yeah. I mean, we're currently in a bear market. I think it's happened 15 times since World War II. So my overall philosophy, which I kind of go two ways. I can split down the middle, Jason. There's like a very small percentage of me that loves conspiracy theories. So I can go down this rabbit hole of like what's going to happen to
They're
our
fun
world.
to explore.
I know. But the very more factual data point driven, Rachel, I just believe in the American economy enough to know that like, I just believe we're going to come back from it. I really do. I don't think that this is going to tank. And I don't think we are in this moment. Some people are calling for another great depression is going to happen. I don't think that. Are we entering a recession? We'll find out here the next week or two, maybe. We don't know all of that, but I just believe we're in this weird market right now. But I think 10 years from now, it's going to go up, right? Even sooner than that, but I'm just saying long term. So when I personally think about investing more on even the retirement side, it's long term, and it's going to be a roller coaster. And the only person that gets hurt on a roller coaster is the person that jumps off. So when people freak out, they pull their money out. I'm like, no, 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 stay in it. And again, I'm still being consistent. Winston and I, my husband, we are still investing. We are still putting money towards our Roth and towards our 401k. I mean, and at this point, it's on sale. I'm like, well, go ahead and just keep buying, even though it's not fun. So trust me, when you look at the numbers, I'm like, oh, it's not fun to see the no growth and the loss and all that. But over time, investing for me is a long-term play. It is not short-term. And people get hurt when they make short-sighted decisions with their money. And so for me, again, it's that long-term play.
Yeah, and I mean, that also goes right with the great Warren Buffett, right? He's like, be fearful when people are greedy, which was, literally 12 months ago, and
Yes.
get greedy when when there's fear on the streets. I mean, it lines exactly with what he's saying. How about especially here in Nashville? I mean, it's crazy, right? We've already seen inflation. We've already seen appreciation in the housing market. Now we have a city that is just blown up from a growth perspective. So we're dealing with the triple threat. We look at house prices right now, and it's wild. They're almost like 2.5x what they were 3 years ago. Do you have any take on either first-time home buyers or people that are looking to buy or sell just in the real estate market?
Yeah, I'm not a Debbie Downer on the real estate market. I don't think there's a bubble. I really don't. I know that prices have gone up. I think it went up, what was it, like 23% in 2020 alone. I mean, it is crazy, but the supply demand is what drives real estate. And the supply is still down. We are half the number of new homes on the market than we were in 2008. So when you look at the side-by-side comparison of the recession then versus now, it's a different world. And there's 5 million more millennials within the prime home buying phase of life in the mid 30s than there were in 2008. So the demand is still crazy high and the supply is still crazy low. So I don't see it being this huge bubble that's just absolutely going to pop. Now, will things go back to appraisal? Yes, which is happening now, right? The market's softening because of mortgage rates went up, and so you're seeing that. So if you're a seller, have patience. We're going back to normal real estate times where your house will probably be on the market for 90 to 120 days on average. You're not going to get 53 offers in 12 minutes like some people were getting, getting $200,000 over asking price, like the craziest stories we heard over the last 18 months in Nashville and most places around America. And you're like, what is going on? So that's all. I think that's gone. Like, I think that we're kind of settled in, and I think that's good. I think we need a level of stability. I mean, the fact that it just shot up so quickly felt unstable to me, where I was like, oh gosh. And again, people get fearful and and it's the house they want. So they're going to throw extra money on it, even if they don't have it, even though it stretches their budget and it stresses them out. They're in this bidding war and all of that. So all of that's cooled off, which I'm really thankful for. So again, if you're a seller, have patience. Your house will be on the market more days than it would have been 18 months ago. Be prepared for negotiation. I think buyers are coming in and actually negotiating again the price. All of that is still happening. And so, and again, if you're a buyer, get the appraisal, get the inspection, go back to what the world was 3 years ago in real estate. And that's what's happening. Now, again, Jason, too, there's pockets around the country that we're seeing fluctuation a lot. So you look at a Houston, for instance, and it's really softened, and it's a lot because of the oil and gas demand. That's where majority of jobs are in Houston. And the fact that that's less now, people are moving out. So you do see these random little pockets around the country. But you look at cities like Nashville, places in Florida, most places in Texas, Phoenix, like you do look at these pockets around that are again softening a little bit, but we're not seeing a nosedive in home prices, and I don't think we are.
Yeah, totally. So, a couple things that you mentioned, I think that makes so much sense is the difference we'll talk a lot about this, guys, in the recap too, but the difference in 2008 to now, right, is just supply. There's not inventory like there was in 2008. And I think the big thing you hit on too is this whole multi-generational thing of multi-generations living in the same home. I read it was over the weekend I was reading the paper from 1971 to now. I hope I get this right, and if I don't, I'll correct it in the recap. But more than double the American households have multi-generations living in them because of the price of real estate. It's now 18% of the entire US lives in a household with multi-generations, which is more than double than it was in 1971. So there are those people that are trying to grow, build wealth, and move on. It's just when the time is right. So we'll talk more about that. And also we have Jason Oppenheim from Selling Sunset. He's going to dive into a lot of the stuff Rachel talked about with different cities and primary and secondary cities and the impact that'll have on real estate. So we'll get to that. The last one I want to leave from a tip perspective with you, Rachel, is when you look at pay transparency and then negotiation tricks. So you have a lot of people that work under your enterprise. You have people that work for you. People might come to you and ask for a raise. You hear a lot right now of pay transparency occurring in the industry. What's your overall take on pay transparency, and then any negotiation tips you might want to leave someone with if they're trying to negotiate for themselves in a time where cost of everything is going up?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm all for negotiation, whether it's for your salary at work or you're buying real estate, whatever it is. I think that it's a great tactic to use, because if you ask, the worst they can say is no. And yeah, wages right now are interesting. They're going up so fast in certain industries. You look at, whether it's IT or computer programming. I mean, there's certain industries, and it's just every 2 months, you just see the national salary, the average, it just keeps ticking up. And so I think that there is a point that it's like, okay, what my value is, market value wise, is fair for me to ask for. I think there's that component 100%. But I also do think there's this interesting thing in the world that people are jumping so quickly from job to job because I think we can work remotely. There's more flexibility, and they're chasing dollars. They're like, okay, I can get a $20,000 raise here, there. And I would encourage people to look at the culture too of the company you're plugging into. So much of our work, this could be probably a whole other podcast, but so many hours of our day and our lives are spent in a working environment. And so yes, I want you to get what you can get market value, but by all means, and ask for it and talk to your leader about like, hey, what can I do to best serve the company? What are ways that I can bring more value? Because this is what I'm seeing. I think all those conversations can be had. But I also get a little fearful when people are just jumping for that $10,000 raise here or there, and you're plugging into places that are exhausting you and draining you and maybe overworking you or doing things that you're like, oh, that is just not the culture and the dynamic I want to be in. So when it comes to, looking at your salary and where you're working and all of that, I think it's important to kind of look at yourself as a whole person, because you are. It's not just work Rachel. Work Rachel comes home to home Rachel and mom Rachel and wife Rachel. And so I think there's a really important culture factor too that I want people to think through when they're looking at jobs.
Yeah, and I think also with the culture factor, I heard some response and retort to something I said, and they're like, yeah, but I can't take the job I love because it pays me less. My challenge and response to them would be like, well, and it's great topic that we're discussing here is, have you really analyzed your spending? And if you reduce your spending on X, Y, and Z, and therefore your cash inflow is the same as your current job because you're spending less, but you're happier in the place you know you'll accelerate in a much faster scope, that could be the answer to some of your career issues. So I
Yeah.
love that. That was a challenge and response that I've gotten, and I get a lot of them, and I have just a small healthy business doing this. You guys have an absolute empire doing this. So I'm sure with all the success you've had, you also will get critics. When you guys analyze, like when you're going through the advice that's given and some of the critics that come in, what would you say is like the number one thing that people would criticize the strategies you guys deploy, and how do you guys respond to that? Because I think in every industry, no matter what anyone's doing, they put something out there and there's always trolls or noise or things. And I'm curious, what's the number one kind of criticism you guys would get, and what's the response from Ramsey Solutions with what you guys do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the thing I'm thinking of is real estate, because literally tonight we're doing a live stream called the Real Estate Reality Check. It'll be different when this airs, I know, on your podcast, but we're doing it. And because of the visceral response we've gotten from people, whether it's the fear of real estate, of like it's going to crash and burn, we're freaking out, or what we teach is unattainable. So when it comes to buying just your residence, your primary home, we say to put at least 5% down. If you can put 20 and avoid PMI, obviously that is beautiful, wonderful. 5%, and then and we teach a 15-year fixed rate versus a 30. And for your payment to be no more than 25 to 30% of your take-home pay. And people hate that. They hate that formula. And right now, and I get it, because where we're sitting right now in 2022, the house you could have gotten in 2019 is a whole lot different than the house you can get right now. And so it is frustrating to feel like you're having to step backwards to what you want in your home. So the real estate formula, it gets a lot of people twisted up.
I love it.
That's the one that's so top of mind.
That makes sense, and you guys are doing it tonight. Some of the things that Rachel just said, we have some 101 listeners, and we have some very complex listeners. For the 101 listeners, the PMI and any of the things she just said, if you were confused on it, stay tuned to the recap. We'll define it all. Rachel, I just have a little bit time with you, so I'm going to do a quick rapid fire. And the first question I got for you, if you hadn't joined the family business, what would Rachel Cruze be doing instead?
Oh, great question. I would probably be a political correspondent for a network.
Wow.
Yeah, I would work for like ABC or CBS or NBC. I would work for one of the big networks, and I love politics.
You definitely have the anchor disposition already set.
Do I? Okay,
I mean,
maybe I'm one step ahead.
The look, the perfect. Do you think ever in your career you might make that transition?
I don't think so. It's but like elections, all of like primaries are coming up in November. I'm like, I can't wait. Every night I will be glued to the TV watching numbers come in. I just love it.
I love it. That is awesome. All right, if I gave you $1 million today, you win the lottery, you get $1 million, what's the first thing you're doing with it?
Oh man. Gosh. Okay, I know this sounds like whatever, but it's just true. Giving is such a huge part of our message. And so I think there's an element of me that I'm like, I would give a chunk first. So my husband and I, there's a few things that we just have passions for in life that I'm like, I would totally, we give to every month, but I'm like, I think I would just kind of give them a shot in the arm and be like, here's some of that. I would go on a great vacation for like a month and just 5-star everything, room service, and just not think twice about it. That would probably be my first 2 moves. And then I'd come back and reassess everything else.
And then dad might yell at you for the spending, and then you'd say, well, they just gave me $1 million.
Well, it's $1 million. It's cash. I did
it. It's a small percentage because it just came in. All right. What do you think is, like, you look back at your career financially and everything that you have done, what do you think your biggest regret is financially?
Oh gosh, biggest regret financially. Oh man. You know, Winston and I, with investing, I think we probably could have been a little bit more aggressive early on. Like we kind of did this, the retirement, the 401k, all of that, and we've opened up a mutual funds just in the past few years so that we throw extra cash at. And I wish we had probably done that sooner. I mean, as we speak right now, it would be down. But like, I look overall and I'm like, man, what that could have been, even, I mean, you know, compound interest. I'm like, even if we had done that 4 years earlier, that kind of thing, those numbers kind of rattle in my brain always. Yeah.
Gotcha. A little bit of risk factoring. All right. The
Yeah.
last one I got for you. Are there any other business ventures that Rachel currently isn't involved in that you can see, just given the core of what you've already built, that you guys eventually will get into? Or is there anything on the radar?
Not specifically, but I do think technology and digital experiences is just where we're going. As much as we love in-person relational, content and all of that, there's something about life change that happens in a community. That's why Financial Beach University, our class, I think did so well, is that you were around people walking through the exact same thing together. And we're trying to recreate that on a digital experience, and it's been much harder, much more difficult than what we originally thought. So I'm like, I don't know if there's a platform out there or an idea, if it's a company, I don't know what it is, but if there's some kind of digital way to do an in-person experience and to have that community aspect that could be like a light switch flip, I would get into that tomorrow.
That's pretty cool. And that obviously is the future. As you're talking, though, I'm thinking about the way that you guys have built what you've built, and you've continued to keep the momentum up. And you guys are privately held, family owned. There's got to be people knocking on your door to want to buy what you have done. I mean, is that a potential for Ramsey, an exit to like a bigger conglomerate?
No, it's really not. And we have a succession plan that's been in place for about 5 years. It will continue
Uh,
on for probably the next 15.
wow.
Because what's interesting about Ramsey is Dave is the face. I mean, he's been the face for years, and he's been this. So he plays such an interesting role of being CEO, running the thing, and being the personality, and that usually doesn't happen. And so, what it looks like to really kind of take the core messages of helping people in a really toxic world, whether it's with career or money or mental health, and kind of distributing that knowledge across people. So we have 7 of people who do what I do, Ramsey personalities is what we call them, that speak and write on money and also others in different topics. So that's kind of the goal, is to transition out of Dave. So even, the Dave Ramsey show is now the Ramsey show. So there's been some small changes we've made brand wise to help with that transition. So
Got
I
it.
don't know. And what's funny in our family, like will or estate or whatever you call it,
Yeah.
he had that if he, if he died, or when he dies, not if he dies,
Sure.
he doesn't live
We're all
forever.
going eventually.
Yeah. When he dies, that even if us kids sold it, we had a clause in there for about 5 years that 90% would go to charity and we would
Wow.
keep 10%. And he's changed it over the last 2 years because he was like,
Sure.
it feels like a weird control thing that I have from the grave with you
Yeah.
guys. And I trust you guys enough to like make good decisions.
Yeah.
But that was his heart though. I mean, for so long, he's like, this
Wow.
is not to like, yeah, it's not to grow and cash out. That's not the long-term play. It's to continue to help people as much as possible because, as you know, our world it's wild. So any guidance, instruction, and inspiration we can give is really what we're hoping to do for generations. If
Ramsey
people will have
Solutions
us.
is here to stay. I mean, you heard it right here, right now. You now know that. This was a different type of format for our podcast. Rather than diving into our guest's financial situation, we have our guest helping your financial situation. So with the trading secret, I would like to stick with that theme if we could, Rachel. One trading secret that, someone today could get from you as it relates to maybe wealth management, debt management, just maybe overall your golden rule. What's one trading secret related to personal finance that you can leave our listeners with?
I would say a secret. I think there's such an important mindset that you have to have. And again, it kind of goes back to that long-term play. But I just see specifically where we are right now with the market and seeing people's decisions. So many decisions are based out of fear.
Mhm.
They're freaked out and they're worried, and you make a lot of bad financial decisions. Actually, I think Warren Buffett said it: when you're fearful and when you're drunk, you make really bad money decisions with both of those. So really, if you can, gathering facts over feelings. And there's a lot of feelings out there, and when you make decisions based on that, again, I think you're going to make some bad long-term decisions with your money. So a secret, I would say, as much as you can. Yes, the feelings are there and they're real, but you have to look at data points and look at truth. A lot of people are throwing tons of ideas out there and tons of predictions and all of that, but you have to base it on fact. Facts are your friends during all good and bad times. But really, I think the biggest thing is look at facts. And that's even when you're picking out a mutual fund. Look at the track record. What's it doing? It's not, oh, that feels good. When you're picking a real estate agent, pick a badass real estate agent. Don't pick Uncle Harry's friends who he gets his hair cut with, right? Like you want to look at facts and data points and your big decisions with money, and even small ones, but really your big ones. So facts over feelings would be my secret.
That is such a good one, and it's so intuitive, and it's also so timely. The amount of like articles that I have received from friends in the last week, just given what's happening in the market, about that's creating, so it's a media headline that goes to them. It creates a feeling, like you just said. The feeling creates an action of some sort to them, and they also send it to me. And my response to all of them is, guys, by the time Wall Street or CNBC or MSNBC or Bloomberg is writing about it, it's well already priced into the market. Like, so don't make a change now because you just read it. And that's such a great example of the feelings and facts. I love it. It's a great way to end. Rachel, anybody that wants more of what's going on in your world or your show or your books, where can they find everything?
Yeah, you can go to rachelcruze.com. I have a podcast, The Rachel Cruze Show, which you've been a guest on. So thank you, Jason. And my books are anywhere books are sold.
Awesome. Well, informative, insightful, Rachel, and we needed this in a very timely fashion given what's going on. So thank you so much for being on this episode of Trading Secrets.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jason.